Julia, thank you ever so much for joining me on the International Classroom podcast today. Whereabouts in the world do we find you?
I'm located in Frankfurt, Germany.
Amazing, amazing. And rather than me do this for you, how would you like to introduce yourself to our listeners?
Maybe just briefly. I'm Julia, I'm from Germany, and I teach in a small international school, like 15 kilometers south of Frankfurt. I really enjoy teaching. It's my passion. I've been teaching for about 15 years, and I've started my leadership journey about 4 years ago, just because I wanted to make an impact in my school and be part of the decision making and, just make a difference in the school community and maybe further on also a little bit wider spread.
Amazing, amazing. Obviously, we're going to dive into a little bit about your educational journey as well. Have you always taught in Germany? Have you taught anywhere else in the world?
I've taught in England as well, and I went to school in England as a student in my sixth form years.
Okay, whereabouts in England?
Germany.
Oh, fantastic. Whereabouts in England were you for school and then in terms of teaching?
I went to a Catholic boys' school as the only girl, which was pretty cool. And I taught in Uppingham at a boarding school.
I know Uppingham. Yeah, it's a very well-known school across the UK. Funnily enough, some of the boys who I teach in Dubai moved to be out there, and I had some friends that go a beautiful part of the country as well, Uppingham, in and around there.
Very beautiful, yeah.
Very, very nice. And now you're obviously you're a principal?
Yeah.
Did I get that right? How's the start of the year been for you?
It's been pretty smooth. The last 2 years were pretty, rocky. So year 3 as a principal was fairly smooth, and you get to know the systems and you make adjustments and how things are going a little bit better. So it's been quite smooth, and we're on holiday already, which is nice. It was a good start to the year.
Amazing.
Definitely.
Yeah, we're recording this. We have ours. Some schools in the Dubai have theirs this week, and we have ours next week. So I do, again, I've already said this, but I do appreciate you coming on, giving up some time over the holiday to come and teach with us, and hopefully for us educate us a little bit on what teaching in Germany is like for that. So diving into this, obviously someone who kind of obviously did part of their education in Germany is now obviously teaching within that themselves. How would you describe the education system there in terms of just comparing approaches with the teachers and comparing approaches with the students that you get as well?
I think the German education system has been pretty steady for the last 30 years, I think. So the teacher education is really solid. The degree is about, depending on the school form, if you teach secondary or primary school, is 6 years of training. And then you've got teacher training as well. That depends a little bit from state to state. But I think the education to become a teacher is very solid. And I think that's also one reason that the quality of the German education system is quite good. I think what's special in comparison to other systems is the vocational school system, that after you're 10, you can choose if you continue into higher secondary education or if you choose a vocational path. And that's pretty interesting for students who do not want to go to university yet, and that want to focus more on trade school. And there's also different areas depending on the career choice. And then you go to vocational school for another 3 years, and then you can again reconsider whether you want to go to university, where you want to go to a specialized applied science university. So that kind of extra path for the students who may not want to continue with normal school, upper high school. That's, I think, pretty unique to Germany, the vocational education system.
just going to go back to something you said about the teacher training.
Yeah.
I'm curious, did you do your teacher training in Germany or was it in the UK?
I did do both. So I went to German university for my master's, and then I did like a PGCE in England. So I did a bit of both.
Yeah, because you I maybe correct me this, but did you say the training for teachers through Germany is 6 years?
Yes, for gymnasium, which is the upper secondary, like from year 5 to 13. If you do like a primary school or like middle school, which is called Realschule, then the degree is like 4 years or 4.5, depending. But yeah, like for the upper school, including like the practical training, it's 6 years.
Okay, that comparison to what we do, I've trained in within the UK, they're worlds apart, aren't they? Do you think? I mean, from whether you know this or not, but is there anything particular that's taking place within this training or that teachers are doing that require it to be so long?
I think it's the way that it's set up, because it is kind of a combined degree. So depending on your subjects, you have to study 2 subjects that you would be teaching. You basically do the subjects in it themselves, and then you have to add like the pedagogy, the psychology, the methodology. So you basically study like 2 subjects at a master's level, and then you add the education on top. So amazing. I think it's more the subject specific contents. Like, for instance, I am an English and German teacher by training. So I had to study like literature, linguistics, like medieval literature, contemporary linguistics, and pragmatics, all kinds of fields that I would have studied if I had studied like literature as a degree or linguistics as a degree. So like whether you need that in your job later on, that's a different kind of story. But technically you would be able to work in the field like of linguistics or literature, or, like that's the reason why it takes so long. It's not so much the pedagogy and the teacher training, because that's a separate part of the degree. It's more the content.
It's making sure making sure educators have a strong content base to then build on. Yeah, I get that. I completely get that. So from your side now, coming onto your sort of teaching journey or teaching experience, like you've worked obviously in the UK for a period of time and obviously back into Germany. What do you see as some of the differences that you've encountered? I know obviously you've worked in IB schools as well, so how those fit together. What are some of the differences you're seeing across sort of the nationalities and the types of students you get in your schools?
I think, again, like from the background, obviously, like international schools are very diverse. And therefore, in terms of the teaching, the student background, that's quite diverse. I think like in the state systems, it may or may not be that diverse. I think from a German perspective, I think it depends on the school form in terms of the nationality. But of course, in terms of the content, the state systems are very state determined. So in terms of the curriculum, obviously that's state-based, whereas international education is supposed to be more globalized. And in terms of the content and the delivery, it's maybe has more perspectives. And I find this really interesting also from a teaching perspective, especially also having seen different school systems outside of Germany. I think like the beauty of the international school system is that you don't focus specifically on one content and one context, but it's global, and therefore you can allow for different perspectives. And obviously, in terms of the teaching of that, I think that's very interesting to bring in the different contexts.
So with the school that you're currently in now, is that's an IB school?
It's an IB school, yeah.
And so with the teachers that you currently have within your school, are they completely global, or do a lot of them stem from Germany themselves or around Europe? What's the makeup of your teaching cohort?
It's very diverse. So we've got teachers from all parts of the world, and like we don't have that many German teachers, which I find interesting as well. So like I'm one of the few German teachers, and born and raised in Germany, and it's quite interesting that we also have a lot of teachers from non-English speaking countries, because sometimes in international schools, like the preference is for native speakers or first language English speakers. But that's quite interesting in our school context that we do have a lot of people from different countries. Yeah, and English is not their first language.
Yeah, because I was curious in terms of whenever I've spoke with someone who is an international teacher, different schools they might be in, is what the makeup of their teaching cohort is, just simply because of whether then it has an impact on the quality of the pedagogy, the types of teacher trainings that you do, especially if it's from a real diverse mix. What I'm finding is, just from this example, in terms of there is different depths and different breadths of teacher training. So I'm curious in terms of what you found in terms of the levels of pedagogy and the teaching expertise. Whether there's things that stand out, whether there's certain people who train in different countries, whether there's different areas of expertise and knowledge that they have, or what's your take on it in terms of from what you've had as these last couple of years as a principal?
And this is my own experience as well. Like, I think the students learn best if they are the center of the learning and the center of the education. And a lot of it is facilitation, right? It's not transfer of knowledge in terms of, like passing on information. That usually doesn't work that well. So I think the best teachers are the ones that can pick the right resources, that can make the lessons engaging, and that can facilitate really well. And that's really hard to kind of place into a different background or different education, so to say. I think it's, and this is what I really like about the IB system as well, that it puts the learner in the center, and like the teacher is the facilitator of the learning, and like finding engaging activities, tailoring the instruction to the different learners and making it as meaningful as possible. And I think that's the teachers who can do that well, in my opinion, are the best educators.
That's a great answer, by the way. Curious for this one then, in terms of being, obviously you're an international school following the IB within Germany. Are there any sort of state types of curriculum or practices that you have to do? So for example, in Dubai, moral and social education is a key component that we have to do based on sort of Emirati Islamic values. So all the students, no matter where they're from, will come and do it. Mm-hmm. Is there anything that a similar vein or something along those lines that students within your school, even though you're an IB school but based in Germany, that they have to do?
So if they are state recognized and they receive state funding, then the state curriculum has to be taught. But then at the same time, the IB is a framework. So it's more about the way of teaching and how you make the content accessible to the students, whatever that content is. And I think that's also like one of the key aspects of the IB as a framework, is kind of dependent on the situation. So there's no specific subject that has to be taught in a certain way. It's more, if you want to be state recognized, you have to base the curriculum on the state curriculum. But that in itself is quite, it depends a little bit on the subject. In itself is quite open. And then it's the IB framework that, again, is that facilitation of how the curriculum is being taught.
So you don't have to do anything. So from a German government, German education side of things, you don't have to follow anything they say. It's purely, you can follow the IB, and obviously the framework that you do and the content you deliver is yours.
Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah, great to know. So I'm really curious then to dive into obviously yourself and your journey as an educator and how you've been influenced by the environments that you've been in. What's been and grown with you in terms of your teaching philosophy, things that you are passionate about and you think are at the core of education?
I think I'm a really strong believer of project-based learning and also service learning, and it comes a little bit from my background. Before I was a teacher, I was quite involved in the parish, and I did a lot of projects within my local community, and obviously being a parish member service is quite important, and that I think has given me and also people in my surrounding a lot of opportunities to take risks, to take responsibility, to share whatever we were working on, and finding a curriculum that allows for that kind of gives purpose and is meaningful. That is what that was my drive as an educator. So when I'm teaching and in my school, I think the students learn best if what they do has a meaning, if it's authentic, and ideally if somebody else can benefit from the learning, not just the students themselves, but maybe someone in the school community, someone in the local community, that they understand what they are doing, why this is important, and how that provides a service.
Yeah, I was really curious about that because project-based learning we've come across, and I think teachers talk a lot about that. But service learning is something it's new to me. What is, if you were simplifying it down for those people listening out there, what is service learning?
So it's basically that the learning serves a purpose and a community. So, for instance, in a practical context, when the students when they learn about short stories in language and literature, they analyze short stories, they read short stories, they write short stories, and then to make it project-based and service learning-based, they write the short stories, they curate their own short stories, they make a short story book, and that book gets put in the library, or they have an event, like a sharing event, like a reading, where the community is invited, maybe other classes are invited, parents are invited, and then they share and recite their own short stories. So basically, they learn something, they produce something, and then they share that learning. And then, for instance, if they were inviting younger students from the class, they would introduce the concept of short stories. They would maybe read their own stories to others. Just that, it's not just something they do, they learn how to do, but they use it, and ideally somebody else benefits from that.
Okay, thank you for explaining that. That's cleared that one up. That's it's very much I suppose that fits in with the IB learner profiles in terms of community and services action and community action. And one of the things from looking at you mentioned earlier was about this global citizenship, about making international students, and perfect for us to be on the international classroom then. I'm curious then in terms of how do you go about providing opportunities for students to become global citizens and globally minded within obviously the framework you work in?
I think maybe if we are thinking about the short story example, bringing that back, we would actually make sure that we read short stories from different contexts, and that the students ideally, each country, each culture has their story traditions, that the students would do inquiry and research into their own stories and bring them to the class, and that we get to know stories from around the world, different perspectives, and again that exchange about values within those stories that are depending on the different cultural contexts, and therefore the students getting this understanding that there's different perspectives, and there may be similarities and things in common between those stories, or different values that are discussed in those stories, but to kind of come to like this exchange of different cultural backgrounds. And then also like within the sharing part, that other people also from different contexts get to listen to these stories, and then having a conversations about the different value systems within those stories. That would be one, like very kind of concrete example of maybe not direct, but how global citizenship can be taught.
Amazing. If there's people out there that maybe haven't come across the IB and the attributes, learner profiles that fit around it, and they're seeing, they hear this term a lot, be a global citizen, be internationally minded. If you were to try and just simply define what that is for them, like what is it? What is it to be a global citizen?
I think the global citizen means that you are like versed and aware of different cultures, that you are open in terms of ideas of other people, that you are able to relate to, like that you use your own background to relate to other people. I think really important is the open-mindedness, the curiosity in other people, in their backgrounds, and in like this appreciation for differences, diversity, but maybe also commonalities between different people.
And I like that because it kind of leads nicely onto the question I've got next, because we talk a lot about international mindfulness, internationally understanding cultures between students. But I want to take it to the next level about obviously teachers. And we touched upon this a little bit earlier, but with your sort of knowledge, background and expertise in terms of working on international curriculum, the school visits that you've done as well, and the Women Ed Network, and being on a part of this kind of global network, as it were, how do you find these different education systems? Or, because you get to go and look at this, or is it a case of that, when we look at the IB and when we look at certain nationalities, they are the same? Or do you find that actually educators and where we are in the world, so for example, Germany, or whether it's a case if you go down, somewhere else in Europe, do they pull in the country's sort of nationality? Do you find that within the schools? Or is it a case of, no, the framework just always fits? I'm just curious of how they compare as you move from different place to different place.
I think it's really important to value the host culture and the host country. Again, like to provide some context for the student. So I think like schools have to value the contexts in which they are in terms of the traditions, in terms of the holidays, in terms of the background. I think that's really important. And then they have to give room to the people and where they come from and how that translates into their experience and into their schooling. So, but not in like the sense of leveling, saying, okay, this is more important than that, but to provide the room for the students that they are rooted in their own kind of background, that the host culture and host country also has its place, but then equally the cultures and the countries of everybody around, if that makes sense.
It does. So I'm curious in terms of German holidays. Like, are there any things that this is really sounds so bad, by the way, so I do apologize with this one. But it's October, and the only thing I know about German holidays for October is Oktoberfest. I have no idea what it is, what it's about. But is that an actual German holiday? Is it rooted in something, or are there any other traditional holidays that within Germany that you have and that the school then celebrates and does something for?
So Oktoberfest is actually mainly in September, which is the contradiction about it.
Yeah, sorry.
It's a Bavarian thing. Munich, of course, the Oktoberfest in Munich is very famous. It's a Volksfest where people get together and they celebrate together, and they wear the Dirndl and like the Lederhosen and that kind of thing. And a lot of places in Germany have their own little Oktoberfest based on the Bavarian Oktoberfest. It's not a public holiday because it goes over several weeks. I think something that would fit as an example is, for instance, St. Martin's Day, which is on the 11th of November. And that's celebrated widely, where the kids, they make lanterns, they craft lanterns, and there's like St. Martin's parade with St. Martin on the horse who leads that parade. And it's about sharing, like when St. Martin shared his cloak, like a lot of, there's bonfires and like there's like these pretzels, Martin's pretzels that are shared. That's something that would be celebrated, and that would be a holiday that the schools would celebrate, that they have St. Martin, like, and then on a horse, and that everybody carries their lantern. It's like a little bit of a pre-Christmassy kind of, like starting the season with the lights and the fire. Yeah, something like that.
Amazing. And obviously, it's what we're looking now, a month away. Is that a big thing within your school?
It hasn't, because it's only been like, usually it's a kindergarten thing more,
Okay.
but this year for the first time, we actually want to do it as a whole school event. Again, like to get some of the older students involved in like the service, because the pretzels have to be handed out, and like the parade has to be supervised, and like the songs have to be accompanied. So this year we'll have that as a whole school event. But other schools, like purely German, they would do that. It's quite common in like primary schools and kindergartens to do that.
Amazing. So you get the sense of, as you mentioned, the host country. But obviously, I'm sure, like the same as we do, you have other nationalities within your school, and you do obviously celebrations for, let's think, we have Diwali that's coming up soon. So we celebrate those types of things as well. That's just my curiosity about German culture and the different holidays that come into it as well. But we were talking about, obviously, being international minded and what it's like to collaborate with other international educators and being able to go out to other schools and around Europe and around the world. I'm curious for you, if you were offering advice to school leaders who are looking to collaborate internationally, like what are some of the benefits and challenges that you've experienced that they would benefit from being aware of?
I think collaboration is always positive, no matter which level it is. Is it in like within the school or network schools or like international? I think exchanging ideas, working on projects, bringing in different perspectives, I think is a huge benefit. It doesn't really help if everybody is siloed and doing their own thing, in terms of, like getting ideas and also bringing people together. I think I couldn't think of like a disadvantage of collaboration if I had to think of something. Like I think it's hugely beneficial on each level, like within classroom to classroom or on a larger scale. Like collaboration is always beneficial.
Yeah, definitely. And the other area I'm interested in is regarding professional development. So obviously you mentioned at the start the thorough nature that German educators have to go through to obviously obtain their teaching degrees and enter into the teaching profession. Once that's done and they're out into obviously the world of work and they're working in schools, is there anything then that they need to and have to keep doing as a professional development side of things? And I'm just wondering then whether that crosses over, because even though you are an IB school, like there may be German teachers there, and then obviously you fall within that remit. Is there anything then that you then have to be able to provide, or are you again left alone?
I think other than other countries, I know that in the American system, depending on the state, that you have to upkeep your license. So therefore you have to have a certain number of professional development credits that you have to kind of collect in order to keep your teaching license. That's not the case. I think it depends also a little bit on yourself and how interested you are in developing yourself as a teacher or as an educator. There is a lot of professional development, but it's not as mandated as in the IB system, for instance, that whenever there is like a syllabus change or like there's a curriculum review that you have to be trained or retrained, or like that you have to kind of keep up to date with certain changes. Like I think in the German system that's more flexible.
Okay. Do you have the ability to work with sort of local schools? We mentioned state schools around you. Do you have like any conferences that take place, or is there any idea of teachers being able to collaborate? Even though IB, even they might have state schools, but are those opportunities there for you as well?
Yes, there are, but like being a private school sometimes is a little bit. Some schools are a bit hesitant to work with private schools. Our school is part of a school network. Therefore, there's collaboration between the network schools. And then also there's a German, there's an association of German international schools. They provide trainings and conferences. And it also, again, it depends a little bit on the school. If you are proactive and you're reaching out to other schools to work on different topics, or again, like within the city, like it depends.
Okay, that's good to know. I'm just curious with it. It's so fascinating to me in terms of, professional development and having the time and space to collaborate, especially when you've got, so many sort of resources around you potentially. I always find it interesting, in even for us in Dubai, every school is standalone near enough as its own business. However, educators within that space are really keen to collaborate and get together. So there is lots of conferences or collab meets, and and the network on LinkedIn is quite vast here in Dubai as well. So and into Abu Dhabi and around in the UAE. So I'm always curious of what that's like in other countries, and whether it's kind of the same, whether it's not quite. So it's interesting to have your take on it from there. But talking about that, I'm really kind of fascinated with this part. Just kind of wrap this up a little bit. But going back to what you said originally about the vocational part. So obviously looking at the state system, but the vocational part of the German system and the skills they start to develop, and whether, just from your take, and obviously being involved with that as you kind of grew up and knowing what you know about it, and then seeing other systems, seeing other curriculum around, like, do you think there is still the need for vocational skills like that, or are you seeing education going in a different way? Or maybe it's that actually I think there's probably more of a need for vocation. What's your standpoint on this?
I think vocational work is really important, and education for that is really important, because not everybody, has to go to university or has to have a career in academia. I think, especially some of the trades, and I think that's kind of like if you need plumbing or things like that, the handy man type of work, that is so important and also so needed, and therefore it's important that people take that path as well. And again, some people maybe, and it doesn't mean that you cannot change career afterwards, but I think it's really important to keep that attractive, and to get students who may want to work more practical, for them to have that opportunity as well, and also to have people then, from the educational perspective, to train those students who choose that path, and again to to keep the quality in terms of the work that's being done. So I think, yeah, those vocational paths, they are really important.
And putting you on the spot, but do you think other national education systems could and would benefit from having something like that ingrained into their systems?
Definitely. I think it's, I mean, like, there are also certain skills, right, that everybody benefits from. So I definitely see the need that there could be more practical work within the curriculum as well.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one at the moment, whether you noticed this, where there's now more of a kind of, I think when I was in school, there was DT, design technology, and it kind of went away a bit. And now what we're seeing is that, okay, STEAM started it, or so STEM, and then it went to STEAM and then STREAM, and now we're starting to see design and technology and what is like BTech engineering is starting to now kind of have a resurgence of such, and that it's more at the forefront, and students want more of it, and parents are actually keen to have this within schools as well. Are you seeing something similar as well?
Yeah, I think also like the maker spaces and like the practical work is finding its way back again, because those are really important skills for the students to have, and like practical things that they also learn how to fix things. And I think also looking further ahead in terms of resources and like the environment, and like instead of throwing everything away, that we learn how to fix things, and like this kind of approach that definitely also, like, I mean, the whole like the technical skills to bring that back and to get the students more excited in that regard.
Yeah, definitely. The hands-on, as you say, like the maker space and just those different types of skills and creativity that comes with it. Yeah, I agree. I completely agree with that one. So just lastly with this, and it might be a bit of a challenge one for me, because we know obviously you are with an IB school, but we're still trying to talk about and frame it around sort of that global perspectives of what it was like in Germany. So it might be more of these, what it was like when you were originally training, or even when you were at school and learning there. But when you, from your knowledge of it, if you could take and introduce maybe one new concept or a project into the education system, like what would it be and why?
Do you mean like from the IB system into the German system, or from the German system into the IB system? Or
let's do both. What would you take? There we go. So what would you bring from the German system, first of all? What would you bring from the German system into the IB system?
That's a really good question. I think what the IB is missing, and that's kind of deliberate, but like it can go quite wrong, is the vagueness in terms of the content. Everything is concept-based, inquiry-based, with the purpose to match the different systems, right? That like it works for different contexts. But the downside of that is that in terms of benchmarks, in terms of like defined competencies, in terms of like really content, that's lacking, especially in the middle years program. I think the DP is different because it's pretty prescribed in terms of content, and then the PYP, the primary is open, as most primary systems are. But in the middle years program, I think it's lacking some concreteness, and like being efficient and German and very like logical in terms of the setup, the way that especially the science and the math curriculum is set up in the German context makes sense in terms of the skill building, in terms of the content, And I think in comparison is way more concrete, and therefore I think like more logical. So that's something that I would bring into the middle years of the IB, like the concrete setup of the maths and science curriculum with a German background.
Fantastic. Let's flip that on its head then. So what would you take from the IB side, do you think, that would then benefit the German system?
I think the curiosity and at the same time the courage that the teacher brings to kind of get off track.
Okay.
That, you know, like you can spend the time to do inquiry and to sometimes kind of really let loose in terms of like content and what the student is interested in, and maybe even in terms of projects, things that may sound like they take a lot of time and you don't see the initial benefit, but this openness and this curiosity and sometimes this developing things alongside the students without necessarily like a very clear like specific outcome, you know, like that the student can take the learning like a different path. I think that's what's missing sometimes in the German system.
Amazing, amazing. Well, thank you ever so much, Julia, for joining us today on the International Classroom. It's been really insightful and just, I can only just say, really interesting to learn about both a little bit of the German system, but the IB side as well, and what you're doing out there in Germany and the approach to it. So really, really appreciate you coming on and speaking with me and sharing this in our global perspectives, just to help us really dive into what it means to be an international teacher and what it means to work in international classrooms. So yeah, really appreciative. Thank you ever so much.
Thank you for having me.